sectors of California's economy. The new law codifies the California Air Resources Board's short-lived climate pollutant reduction strategy, established pursuant, again, to Senator Laura and SB 605. And that was intended to achieve reductions in the statewide emission of short-lived climate pollutants. And actions to reduce short-lived climate pollutants are essential to address the many impacts of climate change on human health, especially California's most at-risk communities and on the environment. And the short-lived refers to those types of pollutants like methane, which are one of 5 key climate change strategy pillars. And these are necessary to meet California's target to reduce GHG, greenhouse gas, emissions 40% below 1990 levels by 2030. This SB 1383 further supports California's effort to achieve the statewide 75% recycling goal by 2020, established in Assembly Bill AB 341, and strengthen the implementation of mandatory commercial organics recycling established in AB 1826. Now, as it pertains to Cal Recycle, which is the agency that oversees the development of how local communities are working, and also other state agencies are working to achieve our statewide reduction targets, SB 1383 established a target to achieve a 50% reduction in the level of the statewide disposal of organic waste from the 2014 level by 2020. That's a lot of numbers there. And a 75% reduction by 2025. Now, of course, we're well past 2020, and recently it was disclosed that we haven't achieved the 50% level by 2020. Therefore, it ratcheted up higher requirements for local governments to achieve. So where we're going to be looking at where we are on the 75% reduction goal, where we are, will we be able to make it by 2025? Now, the law grants Cal Recycle the regulatory authority required to achieve the disposal reduction targets, and establishes an additional target that not less than 20% of currently disposed edible food is recovered for human consumption by 2025. And you can see from this particular slide that the emphasis is really a lot more focused on supply, not so much on demand. Now, I'm going to go through the various requirements that are embodied in the law and the regulations, and what local governments have to achieve in California. Now, based on anecdotal evidence, about a quarter of local governments in California have not fully complied or implemented its provisions. And approximately another third of the local governments have imposed their own compliance schedule via the provisions of Senate Bill 619, which was notification of intent to comply. And that enabled local governments to say, well, we're not at the point where we're implemented all of the provisions, but this is what we're going to do in our schedule to achieve compliance. So what exactly is required of local governments? What is it that people are having to attend to comply? Well, one, there's collection and recycling. Starting in 2022, all jurisdictions will need to provide organic waste collection services to all residents and businesses. That's, residential single family, residential multifamily, and all commercial entities. And so recycle those organic materials using recycling facilities such as anaerobic digestion facilities that create biofuel and electricity, and composting facilities that make soil amendments. There are procurement requirements. As California collects and recycles organic materials, local governments will be required to use the products made from this recycled organic material, such as renewable energy, compost, and mulch. Basically, the equivalent of 160 pounds of organics per residence per year must be procured. That would translate to like 160 pounds of mulch, 96 pounds of compost, or 21 diesel gallon equivalents, energy equivalents per ton diverted in any combination. There's also the requirement for food recovery. And starting in 2022, some food service businesses must donate edible food to food recovery organizations with others starting in 2024. This will help feed the almost 1 in 4 Californians without enough to eat. And California has a 2025 goal to redirect to people in need 20% of edible food currently thrown away. In terms of capacity planning, the law requires counties to take the lead. That's the counties, not the local governments like cities and such, but requires counties to take the lead, collaborating with the local jurisdictions within their county in planning for the necessary organic waste recycling and food recovery capacity needed to divert organic waste from landfills into recycling activities and food recovery organizations. And then in terms of enforcement, even though the law specifies enforcement begins in 2022, really there's a requirement that local jurisdictions and local educational district in the state and non-local entities and federal facilities and CalRecycle must start emphasizing enforcement by January 1st, 2024. There are record-keeping requirements and reporting. Regulated entities or covered entities are required to maintain records that demonstrate how they're complying with the law. These records will assist regulated entities with preparing for compliance inspections required by local and state agencies. There are also waivers and exemptions that are potential for communities if certain conditions are met. And CalRecycle may issue waivers and exemptions to jurisdictions and local educational agencies, things like school districts, to exempt them from some or all of the collection requirements. There are a variety of different resources that are available to local government and to others that are covered by the law, including education, outreach, tools and materials, information, model ordinances, programs and documentations, letters, all kinds of tools that folks would need. There's also funding and grants. Each local jurisdiction that was approved based on their compliance status received over $1 per resident in 2022. And compliance was determined based on local government enactment of an approved mandatory organics recycling ordinance by a specific date, 2022. There's also competitive grants for local governments, for NGOs, non-governmental organizations, nonprofit organizations, and businesses that they can apply for. Now, one of the things that we have to take a look at here is what are we talking about? What is the organic fraction that we're really talking about? How much is available? What's really the current diversion rate? Well, organic waste in terms of SB 1383 includes food, green material, landscape, pruning waste, organic textiles and carpets, lumber, wood waste, paper products, printing and writing paper, manure, biosolids, digestate, and sludges. These constituents may range from 50 to 67% of the municipal solid waste by weight. Now, there's other carbon-based materials such as petroleum plastics that do not count towards organics. But for purposes of our examination of where we are right now, I'll use the upper limit. Approximately 40 million tons of municipal solid waste in 2019 were disposed into landfills by California generators. That's including single-family residences, multifamily, and commercial premises. The latter two, that's commercial and multifamily, are often put into the commercial sector since they're collected via bins and the same vehicles, front-loading vehicles. Generally, single-family residences are collected via carts or barrels using side-loading vehicles. According to CalRecycle, about 7.8 million tons of municipal solid waste were self-hauled, which represents almost 20% of all MSW. So if there were approximately 40 million tons of MSW were disposed of, then the amount of organic waste would be about 26.7 million tons. And of this, it could be estimated that maybe 5 million tons of organic waste were self-hauled. Currently, all the compost and anaerobic digestion facilities utilizing solid organic waste process about 6 million tons of solid organic waste, with an additional 4 million tons capacity that could be brought online. if we assume that the total organics generated, recycled plus disposed, is 32.7 million tons, then the existing diversion rate for organics is about 18%. Adding in the reported 4 million tons of projected capacity at these 173 facilities across the state, then the likely diversion, if all centralized facility capacity is fully utilized, would be about 30%. And of course, this is far less than the 75% diversion stipulated by SB 1383. California has about 160 permitted industrial scale compost facilities and a baker's dozen of industrial scale anaerobic digestion plants that accept and process about 6 million tons of organic materials. And one thing too is, like, as you're putting in questions and stuff, I will get to those questions and we will answer those. So please, as I'm going through the presentation, please put your questions into Q&A and I'll be able to answer them, or others will be able to answer them at the conclusion of this presentation. The total amount of facilities and digestion plants is based on information provided by CalRecycle's SB 1383 Infrastructure and Market Analysis Report, which you can download from CalRecycle's website. That report also states there is approximately 4 million tons of existing permitted capacity currently available to process additional organic materials. And this additional permitted capacity would be used to meet the 2025 required statewide goal. Now, if you take a look at the figure 1 that I have here, U.S. composting facilities by type, I just want to make a note that when you look at that, most composting facilities only handle yard trimmings. So a good portion of the 4 million tons of existing permitted capacity would just be allocated to yard trimmings, not to food, not to other types of material. Okay, moving from that, this doesn't include the potential capacity of any of the 133 wastewater treatment plants that have 80 facilities as anaerobic digestion, and which could be configured to accept solid organic waste, of which there are probably about less than 5 today. Most wastewater treatment plants that have 80 facilities, they take all their material in via pipe, because we put stuff down the garbage disposal and and other forms of input through piping to the wastewater treatment plants. They're not set up to accept solids delivered by garbage trucks or transfer trailers, things of that nature. Now, across the state, 22% of local governments indicated to CalRecycle that they have 500 plus tons of available daily capacity. This also supports the notion that the current available capacity and probably the permitted is not sufficient to meet the targets established by SB 1383. To reach 75% of the disposed organics tonnage by 2025, I'm estimating that there's 20 million tons of capacity required based on the likely 2014 baseline tonnage. That's using 2008, 2014, and 2021 statewide disposal characterization studies. If the projected capacity of 4 million tons is accurate and that capacity is brought online, and again, a lot of that's going to be allocated towards yard trimmings, there's going to be a large shortfall to the 75% recycling rate, and I'm estimating about 16 million tons, which is quite significant. In this slide, though, we can see that there's additional capacity that perhaps we're leaving on the societal table. There is significant potential for communities, individuals, businesses, and institutions, society, to minimize or eliminate the generation of organic waste upstream of the consumer and to recycle on-site or in community-based practices for consumers. Upstream waste is all of the material related to extracting resources, refining resources into usable commodities, producing or manufacturing products, and transporting the product. The waste we see as individuals and businesses, consumers, packaging, disposables, recyclables is what we call the downstream waste. What's really important about this is that the pre-consumer sector generates about 98% of all the waste and emissions in the United States. Our consumer sector, what we call municipal solid waste, only generates about 1.5% of all waste. But even so, what we see in cities is obviously very, very critical, because it leads to what can happen upstreams. And that's, of course, why sweep, and we'll talk more about sweep later, is so important to sustainable materials management. It's important to note that for all intents and purposes, really SB 1383 directly affects only the consumer sector. But like I say, there's numerous opportunities for upstream management for the MSW sectors. Edible food recovery is one option for wholesalers, retailers, supermarkets, and food distributors, as well as now restaurants. Residential units with available land space can implement home composting. Any business of any size can implement on-site composting, dehydration, and anaerobic digestion. Significant amounts of wet organic waste are generated. And really, if you think about it, the #1 cash crop by acreage in the United States is lawns, which could be grass cycled as a minimum. Yet we still end up picking up a lot of that stuff and taking it someplace. Now, I'm going to give 3 examples of very good upstream management efforts. One is Vaughn Safeway in California. Their current collection costs are approximately $200 a ton. But instead of disposing this material through the standard ways of put it in the container and the hauler takes it away, the folks at Vaughn Safeway use backhaul to take food waste back through their normal distribution of new goods back into the same vehicles that come by, deliver the new stuff, take the food waste, and take that to animal feed and composting alternatives. Finished compost is bagged and then sold back at Vaughn Safeway at a profit. Another example is in Diamond Bar, California. Backyard composting, grass cycling, xeriscaping initiative was developed. This is back in around 1999. And with nearly a quarter of the residents receiving a discount on their service by not having to have a green card. So this was really in anticipation of things like SB 1383 and AB 1826. But that was a wonderful example of how local initiative and community initiative could have a major impact, a positive impact on the generation and having to manage our organic material. And then in Paramount, California, El Supermarket built its own anaerobic digestion system to power trucks and equipment. So they don't have to have anybody come by and pick up all their organic material. They handle it on site. Now, there's several European countries and South Korea, Taiwan, Indonesia, China, and India that depend on the processing of human waste and animal waste in the night soil using lower appropriate technology solutions. And I just wanted to mention that, for example, in Sweden, almost 14% of homes practice backyard composting. And in Germany, home composters get exemptions from compulsory bio-waste collection services. And that includes the contributions for the purchase of home composting bins or a reduction of waste taxes. One thing that you might want to take a look at, it's a book called Community Scale Composting Systems, a comprehensive practical guide for closing the food system loop and solving our waste crisis. The author of that book says that the fundamental building blocks of composting systems are the same regardless of scale, and when planned appropriately, community scale composting systems can handle the organics generated by a specific population, neighborhood, or region. This is something that must be thoroughly investigated, supported, and implemented. And to its credit, Cal Recycle has invested over $1 million in community-based composting, organic gardening, and other practices in the past year, but much more, as well as economic incentives and education is needed to achieve community scale systems to the level envisioned by the author and to the level needed to comply with SB 1383. Now, one of the things insofar as collecting and recycling organic materials is that local governments are required to use the products made from this recycled organic material. such as renewable energy, compost, and mulch. Procurement requirements call for 160 pounds per resident per year to be procured. Mulch is 1-to-1, as there's little or no loss except for moisture and weight. So 100 pounds of organics made in mulch equals 100 pounds of procurement equivalents. Of course, handling 100 pounds of a mulch equivalents can be a logistical difficulty for many communities. And then there's application rates that also limit how much you can put into any particular area. Compost, a little bit better because it's a sort of a 0.6-to-1, as there's a marked reduction in weight due to the loss of volatiles, water, and the consumption of organic material. 1 ton of organics becomes 0.6 tons of compost on average. And then renewable natural gas, that's equivalent to about 21 DGEs, diesel gallon equivalents per ton of organics. So if you took a refuse truck which consumes maybe 50 DGEs per day, then that represents about 2.38 tons of organics recycled. And so that's probably a way that a lot of communities are really going to try to focus on meeting the requirement for procurement. Now, not all biogas, and we probably heard a lot about different types of biogas, are created equal according to SB 1383. For instance, biogas that's used for purposes of the procurement must come from organics derived from solids collected from municipal sources. Biogas doesn't count for procurement if derived from landfills. So landfill gas doesn't count. It doesn't count for out-of-state sources. It only is in-state sources. Wastewater treatment facilities that have AD, anaerobic digesters, that don't accept food waste by trucks, only by pipe, well, that won't count either. And then agricultural sources such as pig farms or dairies, those don't count. And unfortunately, right now, most of the biogas that we do have available for people to use, this RNG, renewable natural gas, is derived from landfills, from wastewater treatment facilities, from pig farms and dairies. And in California, a lot of it comes from out of state. Also, compost must be certified. So local government compost may not qualify. Nonetheless, compost is a booming market and the fastest growing sector of recycling in the United States. There's also the issue of how to get the methane that we do recover from RNG facilities into the grid for usage, and how to count procurement by community, since we're mixing different gases and such. Now, in terms of edible food, California sends 11.2 billion pounds of food to landfills each year, some of which was still fresh enough to have been recovered to feed people in need. And in 2018, 4.3 million Californians, that was 10% of California's population, didn't have enough to eat. By May 2020, that number had doubled, surging to 9.2 million Californians, 23% of California's population who didn't know where their next meal would come from during the COVID-19 economic crisis. And my working with a lot of food recovery organizations as well has indicated that demand hasn't stopped, not because of the COVID, but because of inflation. And so there's a real need for additional food to be recovered and provided. To the credit of the Cal Recycle, they funded a number of different projects. In fact, over 68 projects, $20 million has been awarded, resulting in 86 million meals, 345 local jobs, 103 million pounds of food kept out of landfills to date, and GHG reductions equal to 21,000 plus cars off the road. The costs and benefits of SB 1383 are wide and varied. Obviously, the beneficial impacts of implementing the program successfully will be major, given that California is the 5th largest economy in the world. We will build a more sustainable economy in the state, and we will be doing some heavy lifting while being a model for the world to follow. And while we can debate the overarching fabric of climate change and the need to reduce atmospheric pollutants, the simple fact remains that ultimately it's the little people who will bear the taxes, the fees, the heavy lifting, and the change in behaviors and lifestyles that will be and are being modified we can review what we do know about the costs and benefits. One is that trash rates will go up. And that's been shown already in a number of different communities that have sort of bitten the bullet and are implementing the program now. And one of the reasons why many communities are sitting on the fence and just kind of waiting to see what's going to happen, letting Cal Recycle come by and say, hey, you need to do this. In other words, undergoing some type of enforcement action. We know that documentation reporting costs will increase. Having to keep track of all this particular material, the procurement requirements, so forth and so on. All of that is going to increase, you know, you might say the requirements and heavy lifting for a lot of local communities. There's also proof of concept required. Routes got to be verified. Regular audits conducted to show little or no contamination. This all adds costs. We also need to add costly pre-processing capacity. And if we want wastewater treatment plants to be involved, then we need to install pre-processing capacity at all wastewater treatment plants, especially the 133 that have 80 facilities. And so that way, their existing 80 capabilities can count towards SB 1383 procurement. We also need MRFs in the state, as material recovery facilities, to add organic processing systems to better provide feedstocks to 80 systems. Those little microorganisms are really picky eaters. they need their food and, you know, homogenized and stabilized so that they can properly consume that and create the gas that we're so interested in. Behavioral change is also costly. We've built a throwaway society that lasts 100 years, and we've proven that we can monetize wastefulness. It's time that we prove that we can monetize conservation. And to give you an example, since World War II, recycling as a percentage of our GDP in the USA has decreased from over 40% to less than 0.5% today. Yet we're recycling more than we ever have in history. So recycling isn't broken. It's our linear economy needs to be fixed and reconfigured into a regenerative and circular economy. So the benefits are collection infrastructure exists and can be modified with little added cost, including the ability to recover edible food. Our on-site diversion systems need to be examined and implemented. They can be very cost effective and easily work into existing waste structures, eliminating the need for costly collection and transfer of matter that is really 90% water. To give you an example there, a sort of a package or small footprint anaerobic digester might cost the same as a 3-yard bin picked up at least once a week. And so the cost of that versus that, hey, we can actually process material on site. And we don't have to pick up then a whole lot of material. Third, we have considerable potential markets that could address the need for capitalization of technological systems. However, these potential markets, especially in soil remediation, need to be recognized and looped into the solid waste systems. Now, one thing that's come up as sort of a controversy is the Little Hoover Commission's vote to accept a draft report recommending a temporary pause of SB 1383, pending technical changes following recently released information from Cal Recycle. The full report was published on June 8th, 2023. Now it goes before the state legislature and administration. For more information, you can visit Little Hoover Commission's website to read the full report. And they contain 12 recommendations, including 1, a temporary pause in SB 1383 implementation. 2nd, an increase in education and outreach. 3rd, a streamlined permitting process for necessary organics processing infrastructure. 4thly, an increase in the focus on hydrogen vehicles and hydrogen power as that industry is currently expanding. 5thly, a permanent exemption for rural, low population and low organic waste producing counties. And one other thing was a removal of the edible food recovery program required under SB 1383. Now, those are just some of the 12 recommendations, and I really urge you to take a look at the report, and if you wish your voice to be heard one way or the other, please check out their website, and we can provide that in follow-up on this to this webinar. One of the major pitfalls to pausing the program, as well as the benefits, I think on the pitfall side, the state has already invested $500 million in infrastructure, edible food recovery, education, and financial assistance to local governments. And furthermore, major players in the industry have made sizable private sector investments in collection equipment, processing equipment, and facilities, and education focused on changing public behavior. Already we see some issues. For example, the recent bankruptcy of Energia's Rialto bioenergy facility in Rialto, California, that can't meet financial obligations due to the paucity of processed organics. They're only at 10% capacity. Okay, so those are some of the issues there. Like many things in life, and this would be my last major slide, the directives start at the top and work their way down. In this respect, the basic governmental levels that bear the brunt of the heavy lifting are local governments, school districts, and other local agencies. But there is another aspect equally important in this approach, and the emphasis is on the consumer here, not upstream on the taker and maker of the linear economy. And critically, it is a supply mechanism focusing on creating supply rather than encouraging demand, even though you do have that sector or section of the law which focuses on procurement. But we can go over several takeaways from the experiment, and I'll just go through this really quickly. And I think really a lot of these could be the basis of additional webinars in the future because we have limited time today. One is, how do we encourage more upstream activities, not only at the consumer level, but at the pre-consumer level as well? Given the lack of right kind of supply, processable organics, can government, industry, and the public come together to work out the infrastructure, programs, education, and willingness to make effective change? What investment can we use, and where does it come from to build robust community composting systems and develop rate structures that monetize conservation habits in society? And given that there's no national plan for sustainable materials management, and the emphasis is on the grassroots, bottom-up growth, states and local governments really must carefully examine their specific circumstances and determine the right courses of action to right-size their waste management services and minimize the reliance on industrial scale systems as if only mass-based systems will work. Nothing in the environment depends upon mass-based systems, but rather localized systems that match local conditions and fit local needs. So we've talked a lot about the topics in this presentation because SB 1383 is indeed game-changing legislation and regulation. I hope in the near term that we can discuss the many open topics in future webinars and find solutions that will move us towards sustainable materials management that relies less on EDIC, but rather on common sense and prosperity. With that, I'm going to stop my share and turn it back over to Rob and Natasha.
Thank you so much, John Michael. While Natasha is putting up her slides, we had a question from the audience that at the beginning of 2024, when enforcement moves to the local level, is there any state funding provided besides the grants that you mentioned?
Right now, there is no funding that's going to be available for local communities to be able to tap into to enforce the requirements of SB 1383 at present.
Great. Okay, well, not great, but thank you for answering. So Natasha, take it away. We've got a couple of other questions we'll address at the end if we've got some time.
Great. Thanks, John Michael, for that peek on the ground level of how organics recycling has been rolling out in California for the last decade. I think I'm going to be leaving this talk trying to surround my head with how the ratepayer can be least affected by creating more ways for them to be taught to reduce the source as well and start to charge large generators for that need for that infrastructure build out. And also thanks for the information you gave us on SWEEP. I'll give just a little bit more. We have I'm sure you can tell, SWEEP, we have a vision of a world without waste, and we're basically creating a standard and a rating system that incentivizes local governments and their solid waste handlers to go through a third-party certification that verifies that their entire waste stream is circular and environmentally sound. And some background about us at SWEEP. We were founded by Rob Watson here, who's on the call, the same man that founded LEED, which is the largest and fastest growing green building rating system used around the world. So just to give you some background, that we do have some skill at creating standards, some history in creating standards, because that's been used for about 25 years in the green building system. But as Rob was creating that same rating system to measure efficiency in building energy and water usage, he saw similar irregularities in the waste industry. There was no universal measurement for diversion or even universal definitions for the materials being measured. So according to the US Census, there are about 89,000 local governments and special districts in the United States. And in those 89,000 districts, you will see 1,000 different types of recycling programs and systems. And in those 1,000 programs, why there are even 1,000 programs to begin with is because there's no standardization, right? So basically, we're basically, oh God, I'm sorry, I'm losing my little thoughts here. It's just let me move forward. So, because I'm just trying to get through the slides. So at SWEEP, one of the key pillars of the work setting about to clearly define industry terms, we are creating a standard and definition so that one day it will be possible to compare progress across cities based on metrics and systems that everyone is using. And so a snapshot of the ecosystem that SWEEP operates in, similar to the True Standard, which on a micro level certifies how well facilities and buildings perform at minimizing what they send to landfill. SWEEP then certifies what's going on at the macro level, expanding its view on the ecosystem that is the materials management industry. So once those buildings roll their recyclables out to the curb, those true certified buildings that they mean the best by their discards, what's happening to that stuff? Once it's gotten on the truck, are these valuable resources headed to a MRF for further separation and circularity? Or organics headed to a composting facility? Or is everything instead headed to a landfill where they will lose their next level of worth and value? So that's what SWEEP is certifying, that the materials management industry is creating true circular solutions for our discards. And so because this is the model of analysis that we're looking at SWEEP, the only parties eligible to participate in SWEEP pilot certification are local governments and the materials management handlers themselves, the haulers, the MRFs, the transfer stations, the commodities processors like composting facilities, and those that process C and D discards. Membership with SWEEP is then extended to nonprofits and consultants, waste brokers, who are useful conduits furthering the work through municipality, though a municipality can be a member too. And members are very important to SWEEP because you're basically helping us craft the standard. The standard that we're using right now to do our certifications was put together by hundreds of great subject matter experts in the solid waste field, some with decades of experience, like people on the call. And thousands of hours have gone into creating this standard. So even if you're not going to be a local government or material management handler that's going through certification, please come join us and keep helping us to shape the sustainable materials management industry and definition and conversation. So certification in SWEEP is based on measuring an eligible participant against 5 performance categories. Let me see if I should just go forward. And basically, it's just 100 points total of all these performance categories. And we also have 10 points that if you've decided that there's some new novel way that you're creating diversion that we haven't thought of and that is not represented in our standard, please submit it with your certification and you can get extra points for innovation. Let's see. And they total up to 100 points, like I was saying. We've got certified silver, gold, and platinum. And eventually SWEEP will be creating a SWEEP 0 standard that will be just a pass fail. So as it pertains to organics, I was going to go through the categories as organics pertains to how you can gain points. And so let's see here. For sustainable materials management, there's a possible 11 points. So out of those 100 points total, any kind of organics programming has the potential of getting up to 55 points for things that you're doing to make sure that your operation is sustainable and circular. And so for the sustainable materials management policy, that's a possible 11 points. This is the policy, obviously. It's what mandates local governments or the programs that those industry partners are setting up in their operations to make sure resources skip the landfill and that there is sustainability in their programs, so that once you've been certified, these programs will last once, you know, we've gone and we've given you your cool little pretty stickers and your plaques that say that you're SWEEP certified. So in this space, our cities banning organics from landfill so as not to create harmful greenhouse gases and of course create wonderful compost. There's also waste generation and prevention, and that's a possible 12 points. This credit basically gives points for successfully reducing organics waste generation on the front end, because it's shown that preventing a ton of food from entering the waste stream altogether is 8 to 10 times more climate effective than any other post-collection processing option. So that's your anaerobic digesters, your composting, whether you're using your landfill to pull off landfill gas as a renewable energy, just keep it out of the landfill to begin with, and that's obviously our best option. And so there's points in this category for educating your constituency about source generation. That's 2 points. There's programs that rescue and redistribute edible food to insecure residents. You can get 1 to 3 points for that. There's even points for waste prevention and food rescue through supermarket due date discount programs. There's 1 to 3 points for that. And so within the solid waste collection category, just in SWEEP in general, you're earning points by doing things like reducing greenhouse gas emissions for your collection trucks, your collection trucks. And another example is by improving the fuel economy of your trucks by optimizing collection routes. And so for it to apply to organics, there's something about transparency and how much it's actually costs to run your organics collection, and you can get 2 points for that. So post-collection recovery has a possible 26 points for organic programs. And this category focuses on landfill diversion of all recyclable materials through all kinds of different recovery methods, making sure resources are getting back to the market to get to that highest and next best use out of them. And so, because that's the category in general. So when it comes to organics, that's an obvious win. It's a rich resource, and there are points to be gained for creating high quality products and compost that you can actually sell back on the market. And then post-collection disposal, this category in general measures how effectively you dispose of materials that are truly waste and have no higher value. It is important to note that there are no points given to disposal, but only best management practices are incentivized with these credits. So this is where that landfill gas that's created from organic waste is housed. And if you're finding ways to harness that renewable energy and then power your trucks and maybe even power city fleets, that's where you get points for that. And so I'm trying something new here because we are encouraging people to download the standard now. And so because we're just exactly telling you where credits can be found for organics programming, I'm just going to go through each of these slides really quickly so that once you check this webinar out again on our YouTube channel, and we have plenty of webinars there from past shows. You can go by and just see where these credits are if you download the standard. So this is waste generation and prevention. It'll tell you where the credits are for organics and the points. And then this is for solid waste collection. It'll encourage you to go to our YouTube channel and check out all of our other webinars. And this is for post-collection and recovery. These are the credits that are directly linked to organics processing and programming. And there are some more there. And then, like I said, you can download the standard and check out more information on intents and how to achieve the credits. And then there's post-collection disposal. And then, yeah, what kind of timing do we have? We might want to, do we have a lot of questions? Do we want to save time for questions? Because I can keep going through this if you like.
Just see if we can leave about 5 minutes.
Okay, no worries. So SWEEP, when we're going through our certification process, like I mentioned, there's a certification manual. We have people do their reporting on retrack, which you all may know is a link to the MMP Municipal Measurement Protocol, or I forget that one, sorry. But so that's a very valuable portal we have. These are a few dozen of the local governments and industry that are going through the SWEEP pilot right now. And in fact, the first 4 or so will be completing the pilot process and will be announced very soon. And so right after that, our public standard based on pilot experience will be coming out soon after that. And this is a good time to invite any of you if you're interested in joining that National Consensus Committee very soon. That will be the committee comprised of waste management professionals like yourself, representing all facets of the industry. If you want to weigh in on the next iteration of the standard, we really welcome you to do that. Contact me. My email will be at the end here. If you're interested in weighing in on the next standard. And then some benefits of going through the certification process. It's noted that if you're a municipality that takes the time to get SWEEP certified, you can realize 25% more diversion due to savings from landfill tipping fees. So that's money that's the city's saving. Also, because SWEEP is measuring performance against a standard as a third-party verifier, once you go through the certification process, you are sending a message to your constituents that you're a leader in sustainability, something that many people are very want to align themselves to. And also within this younger population that's very concerned about linking themselves to sustainable and climate efficient causes and business models, you'll actually be attracting a more educated younger population that wants to work with corporations who are walking the talk. So again, ways to get involved. If you want to join a committee, come join SWEEP as a membership and get on some of these committees to help us continue to shape this standard. Or if you're a local government or an actual hauler or processor, see about getting SWEEP certified. These are some of our members here. And let's see, that might be enough. There are benefits to becoming a member. If you become a member, you can be highlighted on one of these webinars here with us. And again, sit on the committees. And again, sorry, went so fast today, but this is the information. If you'd like to contact me, I can tell you about getting onto our National Consensus Committee to go through the next standard iteration or drafts of making sure it's ready for public release. There's our website. This is where this webinar will be put once we've got it all taped, is at that YouTube channel there. And again, you can look at the different credits and compare it to the standard to see if you can get these credits to be certified. And our next webinar will be July 18th with one of our newest members, called Carbatura, it's hard to say. And they are basically a mixed processing technology, if I've got that right. So yes, thanks for joining us today. If you have any questions, please let them know, let Rob know, and he'll try to answer them.
Okay, so thank you very much, Natasha. Thank you very much, John Michael. We have a couple minutes for questions. Hopefully we'll get some folks from the audience asking some additional questions, but I'm just curious, John Michael, I know that, lawns and sort of home gardens are a very significant recipient of pesticides, of fertilizer, et cetera. And I'm just curious, how does that impact the processing of organics and creating, compost and the quality of the compost?
That's a really important point. And actually, years ago, I was involved in a legal case involving a composter that was being sued by other folks about that exact same thing, pesticides in the compost because of the introduction of pesticides, herbicides, fertilizers at homes and local businesses. So definitely that has a major impact, and obviously things like even forever chemicals are likewise a big part of the you might say the question that we have to address when we're using anything that sort of is like outside the control of a very specific system.
Well, I'm really glad you asked that, John Michael, because one of the things I wanted to ask Natasha was to share some of the thinking around PFAS. We currently don't have anything about the forever chemicals in the standard. I'm curious if you can share what the thinking is at SWEEP about that.
About PFAS?
Yes.
I think we're just hanging on to see what is the ruling, and I think that's going to take a couple years. But I know within the standard we are trying to create credits that will allow people to see how they can mitigate it or measure it, but not really to get rid of it. Like it shouldn't be to where they're on the hook for it, which is our haulers and our landfills. We're just creating credits that will allow people to mitigate it, I believe, or test for it or look out for it, right?
Right. So basically understand a little bit about what the problem is and wait for EPA to develop guidance about mitigation and elimination. Is that correct? So we're not going to try and get ahead of EPA, given the state of the science. Is that the basic idea?
That's what I'm trying to say. Yes.
Okay.
Agreed.
And so, I think one of the things that we've noticed in the organics processing field is that, it's hard to make things like anaerobic digestion, for example, cost effective without a very high tip fee. So John Michael, I'm curious, where you see that going and how we might be able to improve the economics of organics processing.
The only way to improve the economics of processing for compost and anaerobic digestion energy is to find ways that we can utilize the material that is generated by these processes, not only the energy like the methane, but also the digestate, and find ways that we can actually solve other types of issues in our society. For example, we have 500,000 toxic properties in the United States, and according to EPA, the #1 way to fix toxic properties is through the introduction of compost. So this is, I think, really going to be a door opener for the kind of reduction in cost, or at least to provide a market so that we can utilize materials in a very cost-effective manner. In other words, like create more closed-loop system. We're not sending stuff out a long ways, but rather bring it right back to the communities where it's vitally needed.
So basically, the hope is that the market will be able to respond and figure out how to collect and process organics in a more cost-effective manner, given the mandate.
Yeah, I mean, we got to stop this whole thing about recycling should be free, because it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
There's always an extraction cost, and if we can find a good market locally and create local circular economy systems, closed loop systems, that's going to be a major benefit, and also a mechanism by which we can grow this burgeoning field.
And just curious, would you say that the state of California is aggressively looking into decentralized composting solutions so that waste doesn't have to travel 70 miles and 80 miles all the time, that organic waste, or that very little?
The fund for centralized facilities is much larger than the funds for you might say community scale. And I think it's going to be incumbent on a lot of other factors, not just the state, but also a lot of other factors. Haulers have to become resource managers, not disposal managers, not waste managers.
I just always see that way, that we're trying to solve for one thing. So if we're trying to solve for short-lived pollutants in the atmosphere, but then still thinking that we're going to haul waste like 100 miles away,
and generate a lot of other pollutants.
Yeah, let's solve this, but then we have this problem. It's like this feedback system that is not solving for it in a holistic way, I guess. So yeah, because we need more.
This has been very interesting, and thank you very much for sharing your expertise, Professor Hulse and Natasha. Please save the chat, because in the chat is a detailed document that covers all of the credits that address organic waste management in SWEEP. It's a complement and supplement to Natasha's presentation. And there are also several links in that chat that are, would be useful. Anybody who wants to join SWEEP can go to our website. If you are a private company or consultant, there is a membership category for you under the private sector, and the dues is based on your annual revenues. So Please join us. We are a very dedicated band of change agents, and we would welcome all those who want to help address the sustainable materials management situation in sweep and in the waste. So with that, since we're a couple minutes over, if there are any questions that people want to ask that were not answered during the webinar, please write to info@sweepstandard.org. And that is also the place to sign up for the National Consensus Committee. And again, the role of the National Consensus Committee is to approve the public release of the Sweep Plus standard, which we are finishing the pilot for. So please help us make it a better standard, contribute your expertise, and then stay tuned for our next webinar. You will be receiving notice about that next week in terms of topic and time, etc. So thank you very much for joining us again for our monthly sweep seminar. And we really appreciate your dedication to a cleaner and more sustainable future. See you next time.
Thank you.